Hello, folks. Welcome back to the program. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania, and my guest tonight is Dr. Corne Mulder, leader of the Freedom Front Plus, who recently came back from a trip here to the States. People are calling it the Afrikaner trip because he came with Theo de Jager from SAAI and Gerard Papenfuss, who's from one of the labor movements, all Afrikaners. So people are calling it the Afrikaner trip. And as I understand it, they were invited here. And we tried to arrange for an interview, but their schedule was pretty chock full. And I'm sorry that we didn't get to do that, Dr. Mulder. I'm really sorry because I had questions for you that nobody asked. And now it's been a while. We finally got a chance to chat. So I'm glad that your trip went well here. And I want to welcome you to the program. Thanks for giving us your time tonight.
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. It's an honor and privilege to participate. You are absolutely correct. Our schedule was very hectic while we were in Washington. Never mind the heat wave that we experienced in Washington. It was rather hot, but now we're back in Africa, and it's a privilege to talk to you tonight. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Dr. Mulder. I think a lot of people don't realize that Washington was a swamp when it was built. In fact, if you went on the mall in the 1930s, there were still cattle grazing there, where you find the World War II Memorial and the reflecting pool in front of the Lincoln is. It was a malaria region for a long time, and so we're not that far removed from events in West Africa and the environment of West Africa and DC. It's brutally hot and quite humid there in the summertime. So I'm sorry you're subjected to that, but I just tell you, it isn't any better in Durban.
It's very humid, but that's true.
All right, so let's talk about this trip. You came to the States. So what was the genesis of this? Did someone reach out and say, "Hey, listen, we'd like to invite you over here"? Maybe one organization or a bunch of them. I mean, what was there? I don't know. Can you disclose? Was there a champion who kind of put this together for you on this side, or did you get one invite and said, "Hey, while we're there, let's do these other things"?
No, what basically happened was I had some interaction with people from the United States here in South Africa, from the embassy, but also some individuals that were visiting South Africa. And we had good interaction, and they said, but what you are saying needs to be told in Washington. And I said, well, fine, let's see if we can put this together. And then a specific invite came from the United States, from the company called C5 Capital, and they specifically invited us to Washington, and they assisted us greatly with putting everything together, making it possible to have all those meetings. And in the end, it was a very good trip.
All right, so you went to quite a few places. I saw that you met with Josh from the Hudson Institute, and I don't know who else you met with. Can you disclose some of the places you went?
Yeah, sure. No, we were very fortunate. It was a hectic program, and I've learned a lot about Washington and how it operates, and I don't know everything, but it makes quite clear and quite sense. We had some interaction at the White House. We had some interaction at the Senate, at the House of Representatives, at the State Department. And then we also met with 4 think tanks, as well as 2 agricultural unions that represent the majority of farmers in the United States, I understand, as well as with some business people. So it was across the board, and in the government institutions, the White House, Senate, House of Reps, and the State Department, as you know, all of them have divisions that specifically deal with Africa, for example, and we were able to meet with people within those specific divisions dealing with those things.
Well, are you able to disclose? I realize the nature of these sort of events, particularly when you're dealing diplomacy, you can't always share things having been in that world for so long. But are you able to disclose maybe anybody of prominence that you might have met with when you're there? I mean, I don't know that you met with Secretary Rubio or maybe the Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, or something like that.
I can divulge some names, but some I can't. For exactly the reasons that you point out. But we, for example, in the White House, we had a good discussion with some individuals there. One of them being Brendan McNamara, who is the director dealing with African affairs in the National Security Council. We dealt with the gentleman in charge of the Refugee program. We had some representation from the office of the Vice President and some others. In the Senate, for example, we went to the office of Senator Ted Cruz, who's the chairperson of the subcommittee on African affairs. We met with the Security Council people. Congressman Ronnie Jackson, we spoke to some of these people. Dr. Katie Wallach, who deals with that law, or that bill being introduced in the Congress, dealing with the evaluation of the relationship between South Africa and the United States. We met Congressman Nels from Texas 22nd District. And there are some others as well. So it was quite well. At the State Department, we met with Melanie Higgins. She's Assistant Secretary Director for in the African Bureau dealing with Africa and South Africa. So it was a very representative group, and as far as we're concerned, quite serious senior people.
Well, in fact, it is, and that was one of the questions I had. I didn't dispute your visit. I didn't try to rubbish it, but I did say it would be helpful to know who they talked to within the realm of possibility. I think a lot of South African media haven't really asked those questions in that fashion because those names mean nothing to them. But the names you just mentioned mean something to me. So I not that I had a lack of confidence, but it just instills a greater degree of confidence knowing that. The one question I have is, can you share the guy in charge of refugee programs number with me? Because I'm getting tired of being the refugee guy for South Africa. That's not my job.
Yeah. I will make contact and I'll let you have that gentleman's name.
All right, because I'm not the refugee guy and I'm getting tired of it. So I'm carrying the water for the U.S. State Department, and it's about time they started helping out. It's their program. But seriously, okay, let's talk a little bit about this. So let's go back to the meeting when Ramaphosa and his team went to the Oval Office. And contrary to the narrative in the South African press and world press and U.S. press, there was no ambush. Ramaphosa requested that meeting. Trump kindly gave him that meeting. Also, there had been no genuine effort by South Africa to negotiate any sort of trade deal from the announcement of the reciprocal tariffs in early April until that meeting the night before on the 20th of May. I think they met on the 21st. And that's the first time they actually engaged the U.S. to our knowledge publicly, and I believe privately that's the case too. And then since then, the only time is when they sent a minor delegation to the U.S. Africa Business Summit in Luanda instead of sending the trade minister or the foreign minister or even the deputy president or president. 14 heads of African states went there. So they squandered the 90 days. But let's go back to the May meeting. And in that meeting, it was called an ambush by the media, which I think is utter nonsense. And we were also told that Trump lectured Ramaphosa. That's not what I saw there, Dr. Mulder. I saw Ramaphosa lecturing Trump, and he interrupted his host in his host Oval Office, most powerful political figure in the world, whether you like Trump or not. That's a statement. I mean, whether it was Obama, it'd be the same situation. But the bottom line is that in a obviously planted question, Annika Larson asked, President Trump, what will it take for President Ramaphosa to convince you there's no white genocide in South Africa? And then Ramaphosa interrupts him and says, I'll take this question. And then he lectured Trump and told Trump it would take President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans. And it came across the media as if Trump was lecturing Ramaphosa. So what I said covering that live is that, oh, this isn't going to go well. And then, of course, we had Natalie dim the lights moment, which has been become infamous now. So Natalie dimming the lights came, and then they showed the videos. And I think that Trump was very gracious and did all he could not to embarrass Ramaphosa. He didn't show any footage of Ramaphosa saying he can keep his America, we'll keep our South Africa, or screaming vaccine apartheid, despite the fact we gave South Africa's Aspen Pharmacare $711 million to manufacture jabs, or any of the insults that came just around that time frame saying Trump was misinformed, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He didn't put anybody from the ANC in that video. He didn't put any current contemporary stuff in there. He showed former ANC members like Malema and the former president, Zuma, when he was president, singing Kill the Boer. And then he showed the Normandian protest. He could have embarrassed Ramaphosa. He didn't do it. So my point here, and this long build up to it, my question to you is that when they went into behind closed doors, I was sitting here with a basket of popcorn, for comedy's sake. It was appropriate, I think. And they went in behind closed doors, and people were like, well, what's going to happen now? I said, well, Trump's going to give him a PK. You could watch the reaction of the U.S. officials, Hegseth and Rubio and Elon Musk standing there. The look of death on Elon Musk's face, no emotion, while Kumbudzu Nshiveni sat there and chuckled and smirked throughout those videos. I think the only person who behaved appropriately was Parks Tao. He was like just silent, didn't say anything. But they went behind closed doors, and I said to my viewers, I think this is where it's all going to come out, and he's going to get a PK. We saw after this, Ramaphosa went to a press conference. He looked a bit disheveled and shaken. That was our analysis. But we don't know, because uncharacteristically from a meeting like this, not a single thing was leaked by the Trump administration. Not one person in that meeting has said anything. All we had was the South Africans coming back and tell us, oh, everything's well. We reset the relationship. Things are going well. And that's where we went. So in that meeting, I suspected that they demanded things of South Africa to reset the relationship, the tariffs aside, just to reset the relationship. You came to Washington and you met with folks, and then you published a list of 4 prerequisites to reestablish relations, all of which are things that I'd suggested over the past few months are minimum need to be addressed. Is in fact that something that came from the administration directly to the South African government, or did they only give it to you guys when you came over a few months later?
No, it was given to the South African government prior to our visit. And it was almost, I experienced it almost as an act of desperation by saying, listen, we are not being heard. We've conveyed these things. It seems that it's just being ignored. There's a perception that we can ignore these things and we will get back to normal trade. And these things are serious. These things are preconditions. We are not being heard, neither by the government, neither by the embassy in Washington. Can you please go back to South Africa and convey this to the South African public, the media, and the government, and let them understand that this are serious? And that is where it basically came from. If I can just give one step back, when the South African delegation with President Ramaphosa went, I think the idea was to tell President Trump, well, you hear all these things that are wrong in South Africa, don't be too concerned, it's not serious. It's not real in any case, it's disinformation, and then let's talk about trade. And then President Trump's response was, no, I think you should come to the White House, bring your golfing friends with, and we'll have a good discussion. And we all saw what happened in that Oval Office meeting. I would love to know what the viewership internationally was during that whole situation. I predicted before that it would be a diplomatic catastrophe, and it was. Because at that stage already, the relations were so bad that you don't start off on the level of heads of state. You start off on a low official level and try to iron out the differences. And once you make progress and you get to an agreement, then you get the heads of state involved and they can sign an agreement. But in this instance, it started off on the highest level, on the presidential level, and it ended the way we basically saw that. I do have reason to believe that we only saw Act 1, that there was an Act 2 plan, but that didn't come into effect because of how things developed in the Oval Office. I'm quite sure that from the South African delegation's point of view, we all saw what happened during the visit of President Zelensky earlier. And the South African delegation made it very clear that they were not going to step into that kind of situation by creating an argument or trying to argue back with President Trump, etc. That's why nothing basically was said, nothing what basically happened in that instance. And I think some of the interventions by Dr. Johan Rupert and some of the others did have an effect that Act 2 was never made part of the process. What we heard afterwards was, as you correctly point out, when the delegation came back to South Africa, they said, well, it seems that everything is now reset, we had a very constructive meeting, etc., etc. That is not what I heard when I was in Washington at all the meetings. Nobody confirmed that that was the case. As a matter of fact, the opposite happened, and it was not really a negotiating kind of situation. It was more a lunch discussion, and there was more talk about golf and those kind of things, but there was no serious negotiations in terms of resetting the relationship. And then when we went there, we had the meeting in the White House, and then it was clearly said to us, now we have heard what you've got to say, but we want to tell you something from our perspective. And then those four preconditions were basically spelled out, and the whole process that played out from there.
Well, Dr. Mulder, what you just said is very helpful and very informative. It was my supposition, but without talking to a source, in this case you, who was actually there, I held back on it. I said that might be the case, but what you basically said is that the U.S. conveyed these requirements to the South. We don't know if it was at that meeting. I guess we think it's that meeting, or maybe it was later. But they conveyed this to the South African government formally. These preconditions were given to the South African government. They have them. And they've been ignored. And so out of exasperation, you were there. They said, listen, can you take this back to your government and let the public know, because nothing's happening? Because, as I said, it's very unusual for an administration to actually have the discipline not to disclose, sensitive items and sensitive things in meetings. So it was very fascinating to see that. But what I can say that reinforces this point of what you're saying, to add credence to what you're saying, not that it needs any, but no one from the U.S. government has rebuked what you've said in public about the preconditions.
No, absolutely so. And quite interesting, immediately after, when the following happened, that evening, we went back to our office where we operated from, and we drafted our statement, getting this message across after the meeting. But we didn't want to put words in the mouth of the White House and the Trump administration. So before the statement was issued, we sent it back to our colleagues in the White House, and we said, well, this is what we intend to say. Are we reflecting what you wanted to convey correctly? And one or two small changes were done in terms of wording here and there, and then the statement was basically issued with their concurrence. Subsequent to that, I don't know if you saw that, there was an interview that Joshua Masevi did with Linda van Tilburg recently.
I did see that.
And in that specific interview, he also confirms that the conditions that we conveyed, he had some contact with people in the Trump administration, and that these are actually conditions set by the Trump administration. Immediately, obviously, before then, some media in South Africa, some mainstream media tried to play down and said, well, it doesn't work that way. Normally, governments communicate from government to government. That's true. It's all true.
And it happened.
It did happen, and there was no response and no action. And then as an act of say, well, let's ask somebody else to convey this message in a different, maybe an unconventional manner. But I can assure you, everyone in South Africa at this moment are very much aware of those four conditions, the preconditions.
So, Dr. Mulder, let me just run through a few points here, and you can correct me on anything you think I'm incorrect on here from your perspective, because you're in government, you serve in Parliament, longest serving member of South Africa's Parliament presently, and you're the leader of the Freedom Front Plus at this stage. So tell me if I got something wrong. South Africa had an ambassador here who served in that role under Barack Obama, Ibrahim Rasool. They sent him back. They rushed him over here to get him his credentials and be accepted by the State Department before Trump could come in office. I think, and I'll allow for this, I think the South African government thought that was a wise move, so he'd be in place. I don't think it was malicious, but it certainly came across as malicious. They're going to accept him before Trump comes in. And then Ibrahim Rasool made racist comments. They called Trump the leader of a global white supremacy and Americans racist, and America racist. And for that, he was PNG'd and sent home. I will say that the response from the South African government was rather muted, and I thought that was wise. But, okay, so there's no ambassador here. There's no been ambassador here for months now. There's no ambassador designate. The Ramaphosa designated Mcebisi Jonas as a special envoy to America. He's been to London, but he's still in Cape Town, to my knowledge. He's still not here. That's 5 months now. There's no trade representative in Washington. South Korea and Japan and Canada sent representatives within 24 hours when the reciprocal tariffs were announced in April. So no trade representative, no trade delegation. And to my knowledge, the only legitimate engagement they've ever tried to make was this debacle in the Oval Office and then on the sidelines of the U.S.-Africa Business Summit when 14 heads of state from Africa went there because they thought it was important. Ramaphosa was in South Africa. It's 2 hours to Luanda. He didn't go. Mashatile was available. He didn't go. Ronnie Lamola was available. He didn't go. And Parks Tau was available. He didn't go. They sent a minor. And at the same time that this was going on, we have Ronnie Lamola talking about the United States apologized for not going to the Sherpa conference at Sun City. When we didn't do that, we simply followed diplomatic protocol, sending a letter explaining why we won't be present. And he said, we take that as an apology. That was an insult. On top of that, we have the deputy foreign minister for Durko going to the Iranian embassy and signing a book of condolences after the United States bombed the nuclear facilities. Have I missed anything here?
You missed one thing. The deputy president also went to Russia.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, okay. There you go.
A huge delegation to Russia, and they were all there in Russia signing agreements and stuff at the same time. The other thing that you missed or you forgot basically was that President Ramaphosa was going to the G7 in Canada. And he hoped to meet President Trump in that meeting, and I don't know what he hoped to achieve, maybe to talk about trade or to get some deals signed. And then, as we all remember, President Trump left early because of the Iranian situation, and President Ramaphosa couldn't see him. After President Ramaphosa returned, then in South African media it was reported there was no official meeting set up in Canada. President Ramaphosa hoped to bump into President Trump somewhere during these meetings and then most likely would engage, but that didn't actually happen. And you know, the whole idea of setting preconditions is not something only to focus on South Africa. I saw this morning that with regard to Brazil, that the Trump administration said we're going to hit you with these percentages of tariffs and we want you to act on the Bolsonaro court case and sort that out and withdraw that. So it's not strange that some preconditions are set that the Trump administration, in terms of their perspectives, view are of importance.
Well, Dr. Mulder, it's also, from my perspective as an American and a former diplomat, I find it very annoying the approach that the South African government's taken. So, for instance, let's go back to January when Trump suspended international aid for 90 days, the entire globe. What was the response from South Africa's leading politicians in the media? Oh, we're being attacked. South Africa is being targeted. Trump is being aggressive. No, it was the entire planet. And they took offense to it. It wasn't until after Ramaphosa went through the fictitious signing of the Expropriation Compensation Act at Davos, which he'd actually signed in December, 34 days prior so that you couldn't go and get a constitutional court challenge, which most people don't understand. But it wasn't until then that Trump acted, and not even immediately. It was after Ramaphosa said some stupid things publicly. Then on the 7th of February, Trump finally did the executive order. So that response, we're the victims. And now this nonsense that, well, South Africa is being targeted by tariffs, it's political. And that's what Ramaphosa, this is political. It's not political. Trump put reciprocal tariffs on the entire world, including Mongolia.
Yes. And President Trump said right from the beginning, at the beginning of the process, countries that will come first and make a deal will be accommodated. And if you look, for example, if you even look at in the BRICS group, India, which is a senior player in the BRICS group, Prime Minister Modi was one of the first to visit the Oval Office and signed a very positive trade deal in the best interest of India in any case. But our government decided that maybe they'll deal with it in another different way. I don't know how they thought it was going to play out. I have subsequently, since my return, I have written a letter to President Ramaphosa, and I did inform him in writing of those preconditions, and I requested a meeting because I still believe that there is a small door open to talk before the 1st of August. And we should use that opportunity, because in the end, if we are hit with those tariffs, it will be companies, farmers, and ordinary people that will pay the price.
Well, did you get that meeting with President Ramaphosa, or is it scheduled?
It's not scheduled yet. He's looking. His office is looking at his diary, and I hope to see him as soon as possible.
All right, I asked because you are a coalition partner. You're in the government of national unity. So I mean, I should think that you're owed that as a coalition partner, if that coalition is legitimate. All right, so you have some hope. Maybe you're a religious person. You have more hope than I do. Let me put this in perspective, and it's great for you to have hope, because I don't want to see South Africans suffer. I don't want to see South Africans be harmed. But let me put this in perspective. Japan and South Korea came immediately. Canada came immediately. Now, Canada got foolish and tried to put tariffs on us in response. And so Trump gave him a PK and they backed off. But Canada is our closest neighbor and longtime closest ally, other than UK. Japan and South Korea are very close allies in Asia, militarily, diplomatically, and economically. All of them came here immediately. None of them have an agreement. After 3 months plus of negotiating. South Africa's done nothing to negotiate an agreement. So it seems to me the only possible way for South Africa to make any progress by April 1st is to get a meeting and come in and eat humble pie and say, we'll agree to your preconditions. But I can't see the ANC trying to suspend, pause, rescind 145 race-based laws and all these other conditions. So I appreciate your hope, Dr. Mulder, but I'm a pragmatist and a realist, and I have to live in that world. And I think that the 30% is coming. And frankly, I'm reasonably convinced that an additional 10% penalty is going to come, because Trump's response, the way the BRICS reacted and said anyone who supports BRICS policies, obviously people in BRICS would be supporting the policies, will get it with an additional 10%. So that's where I'm coming from. It doesn't agree with what you're saying, and I hope you're right, but I'd like to be proven wrong on this one.
I understand that. I'm an optimist. I'm always an optimist. I will always try to get the best situation. I understand what you're saying, and it makes sense that it's most likely that the tariffs will come into play on the 1st of August at 30% plus 10% because of our involvement in BRICS. At the BRICS leadership conference that ended during the week, President Ramaphosa gave a long interview afterwards, taking responsibility on behalf of BRICS. President Putin and President Xi from Russia and China were not there, so he gave a big discussion in the press conference there afterwards, detailing all the things that happened at that press conference. But you also have noticed that Brazil, Lula responded by saying, well, now Brazil is going to put tariffs on the United States. Well, he missed that President Trump, my apologies, said the percentage of tariffs that you put on us, we will just add that over and above what we've already instituted. So it's a problem. But I'm an optimist. Let's see what comes out of it and what we can do. Because the one thing that I did find during all our discussions in Washington was there's an eagerness to do a trade deal with South Africa. There's eagerness to do some investments, real fixed capital investments, and with a different approach towards Africa. And we saw that yesterday when President Trump met with those 5 African leaders from West Africa, and basically clearly said that there's a different approach from the United States towards Africa, and we understand that. There's no reason, if South Africa is reasonable and understanding of the situation, why we should not be part of that kind of approach and benefit. And one of the things that we basically conveyed during our visit to Washington was that we should move away from aid to trade. And by coincidence, I saw that's exactly what President Trump today somewhere is reported to have said the same. There's huge trade opportunities, and the United States is such a big market. As you know, it's our second largest export partner, and with regard from the United States' point of view, South Africa is their biggest trading partner in Africa. So there are huge opportunities if we do this correctly but it seems that we have some political and ideological barriers on South Africa's side, which is very difficult to get by.
Well, I agree with 100% of that. It's just a little frustrating watching all this stuff play out and how it's developed here. In fact, I talk about the U.S. as a trading partner for South Africa. Historically, we're the largest trading partner for South Africa for a century or thereabouts, or nearly a century, until we were surpassed by China around 2014. But the trade with China is not the same as the trade with America. The trade with China is largely commodity-based exports, which fluctuate based on the demand, and it can punish you. The price of coal isn't always the same price. The price of platinum isn't always the same price. And there's no value added to that. You're just extracting and shipping. Whereas the imports coming from China are finished products that you used to make in South Africa, and you lose the benefication of that. And it's the converse with the U.S. You do ship a lot of commodities. We've got platinum coming in and manganese, things like that. But you also ship BMWs. The X6 is supposed to be coming here soon. You ship 25,000 motor vehicles per year. And the entire vehicle is the materials gathered in South Africa. All the parts are built and assembled, put together. That employs hundreds of thousands of people in a product chain that brings benefication to all of South Africa and is much more valuable trade with a trade surplus instead of a trade deficit. And looking at the math, Dr. Mulder, the $20.5 billion of two-way trade, depending on how you value the South African economy, whether it's $320 billion a year or $410, it's somewhere in there. But that's roughly 5% of your GDP, that trade. So if you get a 30% tariff, which means none of those things are competitive to sell in the States, which means we'll probably just buy them from elsewhere, and you can't absorb the tariff. I mean, your citrus growers can't afford to eat a 30% loss, so they're not going to eat part of that loss. That means that's a 2% likely drop in your GDP just from trade with the U.S., and it won't be picked up by Iran. I'm sorry, Minister Steenhuisen, it's not going to be picked up by Iran.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. And what you're saying makes absolutely economic sense if you look from an economic perspective. But the concern is that the ANC, and that's the other big challenge that we do have. We've got this government of national unity. But the unacceptable thing is that our international relations still remain the exclusive domain of the ANC, which is the larger party, but it's still a minority party in South Africa now, with 40% of the vote. And because it's not economics that prevail, it's international relations in terms of friendships coming from the past, comrade here and comrade there, and that's exactly the problem. And those things are paramount, and we are going to pay the price economically.
Well, it's interesting you say that there is enthusiasm for trade with South Africa. I think it's there. But I think a lot of us that would invest in South Africa are hesitant because I'm not giving 30% of my equity to somebody who didn't build my business. Why should I do that? I'm not responsible for the historical inequities in South Africa. I played no role in that.
Absolutely, and that's why, in terms of those preconditions, it was very clearly conveyed to us that there are certain non-tariff trade barriers. And those are the kind of trade barriers where you have to pay a tax beforehand in terms of employment equity, in terms of those kind of things that have a huge impact on your company even before you start. And as you correctly point out, and that's why the fourth precondition was to say exempt United States entities and companies from those things. But we'll see if there's any response. And I agree with you. I doubt it because it lies at the heart of the ideological breakdown between South Africa and the United States at the moment.
Well, in fact, I agree with you. But some people are like, who responded when they saw the list of preconditions that you shared in public. Some people are like, well, why does the U.S. only care about American companies? Well, because we have a responsibility to America.
Yes, absolutely, and we understand that. Obviously, from the South African perspective, we were immediately inundated with people that said, "But why only for American companies?" And we said, "Well, it's up to America. They are setting the preconditions with regard to theirs. But if that is succeeded to, it will show the folly of those kind of approaches, and eventually we can get back to normality in terms of economic practices in this country."
Well, in fact, the way I look at this, Dr. Mulder, is with the big boy on the block, and I'm not boasting, America is the largest economy in the world and the most important trade partner for South Africa. With the big boy on the block getting that concession, that's a massive crack in the wall. And, like water, it'll flow through there, and eventually the wall collapses and all this stuff would go away if, in fact, that takes place.
Absolutely. You see, the big debate at the moment is I was in a position to ask a question of our president on the 27th of May, and the question I asked basically dealt with economic policy, because the one thing that the parties in the government of national unity do have in common is the fact that we all want to see economic growth. We need to see job creation. But the question is in terms of what kind of economic policy. And we've seen that, that the current policies did not bring economic growth. It did not bring job creation for almost 15 years now, and we're in a very difficult situation. So that's why I asked the president, what new economic policies are you planning in the government? I then got an economics 101 lesson, and the president responded in a certain manner. And I think that's unfortunate. And at the basis of this dilemma is the following. Everyone in South Africa realizes the importance of having equity of opportunity, to give opportunities to each and every one. But the ANC's outcome is something completely different. They want to see equity of outcomes in the end. And it will never happen. It didn't happen in the Soviet Union. It didn't happen in the GDR. It will never happen on this planet. It cannot happen. And I think they know it cannot happen, but that gives the pretense to continue with transformation. Because the claim now is we need transformation until one day we reach equity of outcomes, which will never arise. And at the moment, I think that's the basic point of departure that we're completely different on.
Well, in fact, that's exactly the problem. But that's the dream of socialists and communists the world over, equality of outcomes. First off, that's a complete misunderstanding of the world. I mean, life is a competition. Just ask the viruses and the bacteria and fungi that want to feast on you and use you as a host or kill you. I mean, if life wasn't a competition, we wouldn't have to compete with those things. You wouldn't die from malaria from mosquito bites. So it just runs contrary to nature. It also runs contrary to the nature of Homo sapiens as people. We always have people that are trying to take advantage of other people, and we also have some people that are just naturally more gifted and more talented, and not all of them apply it well, but some do. And others, just through their hard work and dedication, become more gifted and talented, and not recognizing excellence and making everyone the same is just stupid, and it doesn't achieve anything. Yeah. Everyone should have the same opportunity. And I always say, Dr. Mulder, and I think we're in agreement with this, that the role of government is to ensure a level playing field. Not for outcomes, but for opportunity to succeed or fail.
Absolutely, we absolutely agree on that, and nobody in South Africa would be against that. And I think we are very much far along the road to make that possible. But to the ANC, that is not what it's about. They want equity of outcomes, and they claim transformation is necessary. And because of that, these race-based laws, and at the moment, the current policies that prescribe these things and they are doubling down on these things have created a situation of almost zero growth or 1% growth to the maximum, 32% unemployment, 45% youth unemployment. So the economy is in dire straits, and now we want to kick our second largest trading partner in the teeth and walk away from that.
Well, I know you'd probably agree with me in this, but I just want to get your take, because you work with these folks in Parliament. You see them every day from these different parties and listen to their conversations and presumably interact with many of these people in Parliament. So here's the thing. Do these people realize that, okay, I want to invest in South Africa? Unless I'm building a software firm or something that doesn't require much capital, I just need an office building. That's about it. Unless it's something like that. I mean, if I want to build an aluminum smelter or an oil refinery or some office building, that's going to involve a lot of capital. That's going to involve a lot of commitment. But I have to provide my own security because the police are unreliable and inconsistent. I have to, and if I have a trucking industry, I need security for that. I can't count on the rails. I can't ship my iron ore or my coal around the country because the rails are destroyed. I have to ship it by truck, and that's one reason why ArcelorMittal is pulling back, because they can't afford it. They're going bankrupt, bringing all the coking coal into the Vol Triangle by truck instead of by train. So I have to provide my own transportation, my own security, my own electricity, and then I have to deal with employment laws that are very much against the employer, in favor of the worker. And on top of that, I have a workforce that is the most heavily infected with HIV on the planet. People disappear for lengthy periods of time trying to deal with CD4 levels that are low, and then funerals. And your productivity, you have first world productivity amongst some of your workforce, black, white, and brown, not just one group of people. And you have abysmal third world productivity amongst a fair portion of your workforce. So I have to deal with inconsistent efficacy in my workforce and productivity, no electricity, no roads, no rails, racist laws against my organization. And on top of that, I have to give equity to people because they have the right suntan. I mean, why in God's green acre, Dr. Mulder, could you entice me to come invest in South Africa? Do they get this? Do they get this? When I talk to Neil de Beer, I talk about the ANC. You don't have to answer this because you're in government. Neil's not. Yeah. But Neil, I said, Neil, are they just that stupid? And Neil says, they're that stupid, Chris. You don't have to answer it that way, Dr. Mulder. I don't put you in a spot. But do they understand the challenges of putting capital into South Africa?
No, they don't. Some of these challenges were explained to the official spokesperson of the ANC recently in a different podcast. And the reply bluntly came and say, well, if these things bother you when you want to make an investment, go somewhere else. Go and put your company in India. Now, that kind of response indicates that there's no understanding at all in terms of what investment can do and what investment can mean. At some stage, we had a senior person in the ANC who said, well, with regard to the currency, the rand falls, we'll just pick it up. Now, it doesn't work that way in terms of currency. We are part and parcel of a very united and intertwined world economy. And the tragedy is that the ordinary South African citizen, be that black, white, colored, Indian, doesn't matter, they all want a better life. And they are currently trapped by some of the political parties in terms of these extremist kind of ideological views. But I think we may get beyond that sooner than later. For the simple reason that people understand and they can see, and there's a new generation coming up, there's a new middle class developing that understand economics and see how these things work. You can't eat ideology. It doesn't pay the bills.
Well, Dr. Mulder, I appreciate that response, but I will push back on the part about picking up the money. If the rand falls, I can't just pick it back up. See, there's the proof.
You can pick those bills up, but the value you can't pick up. It works a little bit differently in terms of forex internationally.
Yeah, you're right about that. I remember paying R4.50 for a liter of petrol, and it was about 5 rand to the dollar. It's not 5 rand anymore.
No, I can tell you, and that will give you away how old I am. I was in the States in 1981. That's when I was a student, and at that stage the rand was stronger than the dollar. You got $1.25 for 1 rand, but that's many years ago. Now we see where it's going.
All right, let me then shift attention here to another topic here. And look, I don't want to have some incongruity between your delegation and my analysis. I suspect there may be a misunderstanding, or maybe we didn't get the full information about what conversations were. Let me frame this. Give me a moment to do it, okay, because it's necessary. So we have South African politicians, including the Minister of Agriculture, running around talking about AGOA. AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, is a public law. It came into effect in 2000 at the end of the Clinton administration, and it gives duty-free access. This is for my audience, not for you, Dr. Mulder. You know this. Duty-free access to thousands of products. It fluctuates up and down, and services. And then we also have some general agreement on trade and tariffs that was agreed to long ago. This part of the World Trade Organization, which gives also duty-free access. The bottom line is up to 6,000 or 7,000 products and services from South Africa can come in duty-free. And the only requirement was that governments voluntarily comply with certain governance standards. In other words, respect for property rights. We'll go back to that one. And then also governance for health and education, expenditures, things like that. Over 30, almost 40 African countries have signed up for this. Some have been removed, some have been put back in. But the law must be renewed every 5 years. It's a public law. It's not a policy. It's not an executive decision by the President of the United States. It's not a negotiating thing. It's a law. The law was reintroduced by Chris Coons in Congress and the Senate last year in February, April. That bill has gone nowhere. There is not any chance in God's green acre that that bill will get on the floor and be approved by Congress, signed by President Trump by 30 September. So AGOA is gone. It might come back in some other form, but I heard Teo de Jager talk about there's hope for AGOA. Let me frame this, okay? Let me frame this. I think what I'm hearing from you guys, and I hope this is right, is that there were people in Washington who said that you wanted to trade deal and that you're focused on agriculture and focused on other products, but what they want to do is there's time to negotiate a bilateral agreement. I think because it came across as if people are saying AGOA is still available, but AGOA is gone. Am I missing something?
No, you're absolutely right, and I think it was a little bit of mispronunciation or a misinterpretation, not interpretation, from our side. In the sense, we know that AGOA will expire on the 30th of September. What we found in our discussions in the United States was a willingness to replace the AGOA concept with a much better bilateral agreement that will be even more beneficial to our farming community. And I think that is what we try to convey, because in the South African context, our South African people, the farmers, think in terms of AGOA. So we needed to explain to them, we must understand AGOA is gone, but that doesn't mean the end of the possibility of a better bilateral agreement that will be even more beneficial to South Africa in terms of agricultural exports. And I think that's the position. We should have conveyed that more clearly.
Okay, that's my supposition, and that's what I said. Because I mean, Teo's a good guy. I didn't want to argue with him and make him look bad. And I said I think there's a miscommunication here, which I think is the case. Okay, so all right, now that's we're getting that from our conversation. You have talked to DC officials, and that was my supposition. So we've confirmed that. All right, well that's helpful because as I said, I don't think that DC. So I want to go back to a point I didn't get to earlier because. For 25 years, the mantra in the U.S. policy establishment, in the Department of Defense, in USAID, which is gone now, in the State Department, and at the White House, and in the National Security Councils for Africa has been trade, not aid. Trade, not aid. And, African solutions for African problems. Thankfully, that stupid phrase is gone because African solutions include genocides in Rwanda. So that's an African solution. We don't need those. But so that talking point is gone. But the other one, trade, not aid, has been a mantra we've had for years. The only genuine step that I can think of off the top of my head that's coming to fruition is President Trump coming up with the Development Finance Corporation in his first term, which replaces a couple of different organizations and is focused on getting grants and loans to countries. We also had the Millennium Challenge account with that, which the Trump or Bush came up with. That actually made an impact. But Trump appears to be genuinely focused on ending aid, not giving man a fish all time for years on end, like we did with PEPFAR, 22 years for a 5-year temporary program, $8.1 billion. And now Trump has suspended it, looks like. But we're giving people fish instead of teaching them fish. Trump wants to teach people to fish. And not only that, but he wants to get on the trawler with you and both of us get richer. I mean, it seems like it's genuine now coming actual action.
It's absolutely genuine. And there are various reasons for that. I think there's no doubt that everybody understands the involvement of China in Africa. As Dr. Teo de Jager pointed out, they've got 4,900 farmers farming in 44 African countries. And he told the United States officials in each and every little village where they came and where they went, they saw and they found the Chinese were already there. So I think there's an understanding that this is absolutely essential. And the important thing is the United States will have to, and I think that's the intention, get involved with direct foreign investment, get a much stronger footprint, not only about aid or sending money, but by creating reality in terms of infrastructure. And what we did basically in our discussions, we said, and we didn't have a mandate to do that, but we wanted to explain what needed to be done. We said what South Africa should have done was to come with a trade deal to the United States. And we said we would propose the following. First of all, we've got an energy problem in South Africa in terms of energy sufficiency and in terms of power supply. We've got a number of outdated coal-fired power stations with a lot of coal available. Can American companies get involved in terms of trade and try to refurbish and assist with getting those power stations up and running? That will lead to nuclear after that. We've got pebble bed nuclear reactor capability. It was developed in South Africa. Those guys left in the United States. There's some expertise. Let's start there. And then it can lead to infrastructure in terms of roads, harbors, airports, bridges, everything that you need to do. From there on, it will create the opportunity for American companies to come in and do normal investments in terms of what makes sense. That was on the economic side, and we think that's a very important one. The second part of the trade deal that we did propose was something completely different that deals with geopolitical issues. And what we suggested was that we think we need an agreement between Argentina, South Africa, and the United States, being the three countries that control the entry points into the South Atlantic, around the Cape Horn, around the Cape of Good Hope, and through the Panama Canal into the South Atlantic. From our perspective, we don't want to see the Chinese Navy at some stage being in control of Simonstown Naval Base. We all know that the Chinese Navy has been a coastal navy for quite some time, but they are now developing to get into a deep blue sea kind of navy. And we need some kind of strategic agreement in that sense. So I think that, but that's thinking out of the box, and it's not the kind of view of the current ANC situation. But who knows? I believe what has happened is, in terms of the ANC's positioning, they are being seen more and more as the bad guys, politically speaking, internationally, because of certain policy positions. And once you've been seen like that, you will be in a decline position and you will not necessarily turn that around. And I think we are seeing that. Who knows what will happen soon? Nobody knows. There may be a different coalition coming together. There may be a different government of unity. We don't know. But those are the kind of positive things that we would like to see South Africa move into that direction.
Well, I agree 100% with you. Your coal-fired power plants really need refurbishment badly. They had shut down a couple, tried to bring them back up, and they've had lots of problems keeping the turbines going. And we have the expertise here. We had until the Chinese surpassed us with 350 new coal-fired plants every year. We had the largest coal-fired power base in the world, but no longer. We've reduced it to about 18% of our actual power generations coming from coal now. It used to be 75, 80%. But I want to cover a couple things here before we lose time on you this evening. And the first, I want to shift to this refugee topic and then get your perspectives on that. And then I'd like to come back at the end and talk about Police Minister Senzo Mkhunu and Ndlandla Makanasi. Sorry, I'm having a hard time today. I've been saying his name all day and now it escaped my mind. But I want to come back and talk about that and what your expectations are of the president speaking to the country on Sunday night. But let's go to the refugee program. It's been 5 months now since President Trump issued an executive order. And as I described it, you were in Washington. And so if I say anything that you hear something different that you're allowed to share, just tell me if I got it wrong. But people were unsure what was happening. And I said, well, it takes time. You have to do background investigations. Also, Trump suspended assistance for the refugee program. So there's no money. State Department has to rob Peter to pay Paul to find money to get investigators and interviewers over to South Africa to do investigations, pay for the medical checks, and then arrange for transportation, all this stuff. And it's also up in the air about how it's going to be done. Because usually refugees, the International Organization of Migration, pays for it if you don't have the money to make your own transport to get to America from Kenya or from Chad or somewhere like that. And in this case, we don't know how that was going to go. And we know in the first case, there was a charter flight paid by a wealthy individual in America to get those people over. But I told people, I said, this is a proof of concept. We don't do in-country refugee resettlement very often. We've done it in Cuba. We've done it in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We don't do it many places. Usually they're refugees that are with the UNHCR in another country, and then they come here or they go to the Netherlands or UK or Canada. Anyway, so I said it was a proof of concept program. And then on the 12th of May, when I was still in South Africa, after I'd interviewed the first refugee, contrary to BBC's propaganda, they didn't get the first one. I did that in Linwood East. We did that on the Saturday, and I kept that embargoed until I knew they landed on the Monday. And by then I was back in Somerset West. And on the 12th, they put out the statement of interest. People could apply for it. And now that's been happening. A lot of people only 100 people have gone. Nobody's going. And what's this all about? It's for farmers. It's for white people. It's for Afrikaners. None of that's true. It is true from a standpoint those people are eligible, but that's not what the program is for. So the program, you obviously talked to the refugee guy. The program, from my perspective, I received a couple dozen emails in the last 24 hours from people who were writing to me, in secrecy about, how their process has gone, now doing telephonic interviews, sending in their fingerprints, going for health checks. From my perspective, a significant number of people are coming over. And as I predicted, they won't come over on charter flights. That's not how it's normally done. And if you take a look, Dr. Mulder, at the Delta and United flights, there aren't any damn seats on the things because I can't get back to South Africa. I'm going to have to call Elon Musk to give me a business jet to get back because they're full of people coming this way. And those flights weren't that full recently. And I know it's summertime. South Africa's coming over for our summer holiday, but it's booked all the way through September and October, which is not summer. So my question to you about this refugee thing is, look, I don't want to see South Africa bled dry of human capital. And in my view, regardless how many people come over there, whether Afrikaners, coloreds, or Indians, or whoever they are, there will always be Afrikaners in South Africa. You are African. It's your homeland. And even if a few thousand or tens or hundreds of thousands of people come, there'll still be Afrikaners there. So I just want to preface that. But let me get your take on the refugee program, and maybe if I've gotten anything from your perspective that sounds out of whack with what you heard in Washington.
No, you're absolutely right. I just want to share with you one personal experience. Ironically, 50 years ago, 50 years ago, 1975, my father was in government in South Africa, the Minister of Home Affairs at that time. And if you look back in history, at that stage, the government in Portugal fell. And because the government in Portugal fell, Portugal lost its colonies in Angola and in Mozambique. And there was a huge flux of people from Angola and Mozambique towards South Africa and Southwest Africa and Namibia later on. My father had to deal with that. And I found a nice little clip on YouTube the other day of him talking about the Red Cross getting involved, etc., etc. The reason why I'm saying that is we are very thankful for the fact that the Trump administration has reached out to Afrikaners by name and then later expanded that to other minorities in South Africa as well to give that kind of refugee status. And we're very thankful for that. However, it's my duty to do everything in my power possible to prevent us ever from being in a situation where we need to make use of that in thousands of people having to flee South Africa. Because we remain committed. This is our continent. We have named ourselves to the continent, Afrikaner from Africa. My mother tongue is Afrikaans, not English, after our continent. So that's just the one part of that reality. But on the other hand, you're correct. It was kind of a pilot project that was started off as a beginning kind of situation. In our discussion with the person that is in charge of this refugee program, he gave us completely different figures of thousands of people that are applying through different channels and that are being processed at the moment. So I think your gut feeling is right, that it's a much bigger thing than the few people that have been seen that came with those first chartered opportunities, basically to the United States. And in the end, one day, it may be the kind of situation that you've got with Israel. Not all Jews are residing in Israel. They are across around the world, but there is in Israel. So there will always be Afrikaners in South Africa. It's our duty to make a success of that and try to create a future for ourselves. But we are also very thankful for that kind of opportunity that did arise.
Well, and that's kind of what I expected was going on. I mean, I'm not trying to crow or anything, but my analysis has been pretty accurate, if not 100% accurate about this whole program as it went along. And now I had somebody come in my broadcast earlier who was trying to be a chirper and talk about, only 100 people gone and how I have to prove what I'm talking about. No, I don't. I have a responsibility to protect people's identity. I mean, look, Dr. Mulder, I could have gotten 500,000 views on a video if it was all about clicks. And, when I did that interview with Thea von Staden in Linwood East, I could have released it that day and put all those refugees in jeopardy. We saw what happened at the airport.
Exactly. No, that's absolutely great.
Right, but I think I behaved responsibly and held it, and that cost me views because it was reported all over the media by the time I started reporting it, and I had the first interview, which is fine. It's not about that, but I mean, it's very frustrating that people seem to think that I need to prove things to anybody. I mean, my word is my bond. I don't need to prove anything.
The way you acted builds credibility, and that's much more important than clicks.
Agreed, 100%. Yeah, so let's thank you for that insight. That confirms some things, and we appreciate that because I'm not going to attack my government, but I am going to complain about it, okay? I'm going to complain that I think that they should release a little bit of information on the U.S. Embassy website about timelines and expectations if you put a statement of interest in, how we'll get back with you and how long and what's going to happen, because the speculation is rife. It's out of control. And even today, I'm still dealing with situations 5 months after the program's announced. One of my viewers sent me a screen capture of the neighbor they were chatting with saying, because they live in town, down in KZN, and she said, yeah, I put a statement of interest in to go to American Refugee Program. And the neighbor said, you can't do that. You're not a farmer. Come on. It's not for farmers, man. Anyway, but it's just a little frustrating. So I appreciate the insight. Okay, let's shift our attention now. Now, while you were sharing that with me, I can multitask. Unlike Microsoft, I can do both. So I was doing two things simultaneously there. I was actually looking for some information very quickly to see if there's any updates on the Mkhwanazi, his allegations. And now, to be fair, I'm in the U.S. I have a different IP address, and so I do have a subscription to News 24. But they've had tons of stories on this. I just went there to see any latest stories, and every single story on Mkhwanazi is gone. It's all been scrubbed. Now, maybe that's just the results I get here with my subscription. Maybe you get a different one in Cape Town or Joburg, but I just found that fascinating. Anyway, these are damning allegations, and like I always tell people, I have the receipts, and that's what Mkhwanazi is saying. He's got the receipts. He's got WhatsApp conversations, and this involves, I'm calling it Catgate, because Cat is the nickname of one of the criminals involved here. Catgate is on Ramaphosa's doorstep. Is in fact that the reason you believe he's going to speak to the nation on Sunday, what's prompting him to speak? And the problem with the ANC, from my perspective, is there's never any accountability. So I don't know if Mkhuna is going to be sacked or if anybody's going to be held accountable. I doubt it. But in a normal country, and I'm not saying South Africa is abnormal, but in a normal political situation, a scandal like this would lead to resignation of the president or the prime minister, and certainly a sacking of the minister if there's any validity to it. Any thoughts on this about what's going to be discussed Sunday, and any thoughts on the whole unfolding crisis?
Well, my take with the ANC over many years is that what jolts them into action is there's something that directly affects the ANC as a political party. If it's something else, whether it's trade or whatever the case may be, that will not necessarily have immediate reaction. My prediction is the fact that the president will speak to the nation on Sunday evening, most likely, I think, 90% certain, will be on this specific issue, because there's a lot of pressure internally from the ANC veterans who say, but you have to step up, we have to rescue the party, we have to deal with this thing, we can't just ignore it. These allegations are very serious. Now, we've had these kind of allegations in the past with the investigative journalism, some witnesses, some whistleblowers, but this is the first time that it's on the level of a police commissioner and a general on that level that comes out and say, well, I pinpoint this, that, and the other, and as you correctly point out, I've got proof exactly. And the other interesting thing is that in terms of the law, a police provincial commissioner cannot give a press conference unless he's got the permission of the national commissioner. So the National Police Commissioner has also come out and says it was discussed with him prior to the press conference, and he gave his permission to go ahead with that press conference. So that is quite interesting, and we'll see where that goes. But my prediction is that the president will most likely deal with that issue on Sunday evening.
Wow, I think that's interesting. I don't think many of us actually realized that was the case. You have to have permission in order to do that. You can't just go to the press. I appreciate that. When I was in Liberia and I was responsible for the rebuilding the Armed Forces Library after the Civil War, when I arrived there, only 2 people in the embassy were allowed to talk to the international media. That was the ambassador and the head of the public affairs, the public relations, public diplomacy office, Meg Riggs. And they had approval from the Secretary of State. That's how tight it was controlled, because that was such an important program to the U.S. When I got there, we could talk to the local press. They were just getting started, new newspapers. It wasn't going to hurt U.S. reputation if there was a mistake made there. Anyway, but we had the Wall Street Journal and France 24 come over and do some interviews, and I was interviewed. After my interviews, the State Department said that I had permission. So I appreciate that. I get that you have to have authority. From then on, anytime international media contact, now I didn't just run off the reservation. I get a request from New York Times. Hey, the New York Times wants to talk to me. I told the public diplomacy officer, the ambassador, and the State Department, and they're like, yeah, you got the green light. Go ahead. But I mean, that is controlled. So it's good to know that. That's interesting, because I think a lot of people just think anybody can go to the podium. You can't. You risk your job, because you have to speak with one voice in an agency, correct?
Yes, absolutely. That's how it works. That's how it works in South Africa as well. So there's huge expectation to see what the president will come up on Sunday evening with. I think he's under immense pressure, but that's basically because this is a huge threat with regard to the government, to his own position as president, the Minister of Police, senior officials, as the allegations go. It refers, without giving the names at this stage, about politicians currently in Parliament. We don't know who they are referring to, but those kind of things will most likely come out. And because of the pressure applied within the ANC itself, that the party needs to try and rescue and redirect itself. So we'll see where that plays out. I think the normal thing that will happen is, I don't see the minister resigning at this stage. Maybe, if we are lucky, the president may suspend him following an investigation, hopefully a credible investigation. I don't know, depending on the time frames, but there's an urgency that we need to act, or the government needs to act on this at a very, very hasty pace.
Well, I think for a lot of folks, I don't want to say surprising. I mean, if we watch South Africa, whether you're South African or outside, we're not surprised by this sort of thing. But I think disappointing might be a fair way to frame this from my perspective, Dr. Mulder, from the standpoint that, compared to his predecessor, which he set a pretty low bar for excellence, Beckett Chile is pretty low bar. So I think, a dog catcher could outperform that. But it seemed like Senzo Mkhuna was off to a good start as police minister.
Absolutely, he was very well received in this government position that he is, and he seemed to be doing very well. But those are the perceptions, and then these allegations came. Now, it may be that these allegations are completely unfounded, but that's unlikely. Why would somebody on that level make these kind of allegations just for what? But obviously the minister will have the opportunity to testify in front of a commission or to put his case, and then we will hopefully get to the bottom of this and get to the truth. But the impression was he was doing quite well.
Yeah, and that's the impression I had too. But it isn't exactly the first strike. Now, I will say that he may have been misinformed, and when you're in charge of an agency or you're the boss, people prepare things, they bring them to you, and you interrogate that and ask questions, but you don't always get it. What I'm talking about is the thing with the school principal that would happen, in which he was tarred and feathered and his reputation destroyed. He apologized, but that's not sufficient. I mean, more action needs to be taken. But the point is that he jumped right on the report without the full information. So, I mean, this is the second strike in my view.
Correct. No, absolutely right. The first one was a bad one, and it had huge implications for that specific individual. And it played into a narrative, which is a very bad narrative in South Africa. People just jump on the bandwagon and say these things happen, which is not correct. So that was strike one. This is strike two. I want to believe that the minister will come clean at some stage or as soon as possible. But the fact that he has not responded in any manner, I think he's been instructed, obviously, not to say anything. And the president will most likely, as I've said, 90% sure, will deal with this issue on Sunday evening.
So you have, we'll see what happens Sunday evening. Looking forward to that. I'm not in a hurry to get to Sunday evening. We still got the Springboks in Italy tomorrow. I'm more obsessed about that. But you're in the government national unit. You have a minister that's in the president's cabinet, and that, of course, is the former leader of the party, Dr. Peter Groenewald. And he has got arguably the toughest portfolio out there, in my view. Corrections underfunded. I mean, the military is also underfunded, but corrections underfunded. At least the military, most of the people you're dealing with aren't criminals. We've discovered there are some criminals recently, killing Hawks members and such, allegedly. But Dr. Mulder, what's going on with Dr. Groenewald? Is he getting the resources he needs? Is it a challenge for him? Because we see very little reporting about what's happening in corrections.
It remains a huge challenge because of the financial constraints, and specifically with the budget. You remember that we had a huge problem to get the budget. The budget is not through Parliament. We're still discussing the various ministries and the different portfolios. And the Treasury wanted to bring that 2% VAT increase in tax. That was then basically stopped, and then they had to make huge cuts in different budgets, and that also applied to the Department of Corrections. So he's got to make do with less income in the department, but he's doing a good job, and I think that will continue as he's well respected in that instance.
Well, I think just generally he's well respected, as you are, but obviously it was a great strain on him trying to be the leader of the party, answer to constituents, and uphold his responsibilities in Parliament, as well as being a member in the cabinet, answering to two bosses, essentially. Is his quality of life gone up, or has it gone down now that he's full time on corrections? I think it's a fair question.
It's difficult to say. It should have gone up because the party's concern is now my concern, but it also places our party in a very good position. I do not have constraints coming out of the executive. My full attention is towards the party, and that's why I could lead this delegation to the United States. And we were very well received. I can assure you, nobody in South Africa is not very much aware of the fact that this Afrikaner delegation went. And a lot of the responses were very constructive and positive to say, well, at least they achieved what the government could not achieve by getting clear mandate from the United States in terms of what is needed to get this whole thing reset and to see if it's possible.
Well, but to be fair, based on our conversation, the government did get that information. They chose not to share it with the public. They gaslit the public.
Yes. And interesting enough, after we issued our statement, the next morning there was some SMS response from our embassy in Washington, who were quite upset with the fact that we conveyed this, and they said this is very bad. I then asked our people who were with me there to reach immediately out to the embassy and say, whoa, while we're in Washington, I want to meet you and let's discuss this, that we can clear this out. But we never heard from the embassy again until now.
Yeah, that's not unusual. The fire and forget. That's the sort of thing. I've dealt with that a lot. So, It's okay. So, Dr. Mulder, we should wrap up here shortly. You're very generous with your time, and I thank you very much for clarifying some things that I analyzed and made a prediction or made an analysis that made the case that it turns out that each of those things was true. On the AGOA issue, on whether these things were actually conveyed to the government of South Africa, to me, it's a bit disturbing that the government of South Africa wants to pretend that everything is hunky dory. It's all going to be okay. I'm gravely concerned for South Africa's economy. I have a grave fear that by December, South Africa's economy will be in a recession, and not just a minor recession, unless something is done quickly. Now, my hope is that the tariffs take effect. I don't want them to take effect, but I say if they take effect on 1 August, that by mid-September, the pain will be so obvious that they'll have no choice but to try to work something out. But I have grave concerns. Do you as well?
Absolutely, absolute serious concerns, because in the end, it breaks my heart if you drive into town, any town, to see groups, big groups of people unemployed on street corners, desperate for a job. And that's just the beginning of this. And we can do and we should do something about that. It can absolutely be done. But you're right. And at the moment, I think also what was an interesting lesson, when the screws were turned on South Africa, not a single one of the BRICS countries came to the rescue of South Africa. Nothing, not a word. No one even issued a statement in support of what's happening at this stage. And that also should send a very clear message to the public to understand where we should get our support from and where we should not get our support from.
Well, 100%. And even if BRICS countries want to come forward, China has very little interest in offering you better deals for China. They're making out like bandits with South Africa. Why would they want to change it against their favor? Iran is a minor player, and other than funding the ANC, I didn't say that out loud, did I? Other than the relationship with the ANC, there's nothing that's going to come there. I don't care how many trips or how many discussions the Minister of Agriculture has with Iran to buy sheep and mutton. It's not going to change the balance. And Russia is a rounding error. It's such a low percentage of trade with South Africa and they're also engaged in a war that's much more important than South Africa right now. So there's no one coming to your rescue to save you economically, and the European Union can't absorb more of what you've got. So I think it's very unwise what the government of South Africa is doing here, and to me it's whistling past the cemetery.
Yes, it's a denying of the facts, it's denial of the reality. It's a little bit of a bubble that they are operating in, and I think it comes because of, for so many years, whatever the ANC did was accepted internationally as because of the Mandela magic at the past. But I think we've moved beyond that. Now South Africa's got to stand up on its own legs and do what is necessary in the best interest of everyone, and that's not happening. And we cannot expect investment while at the same time want to be friends with all the rogue states in the world. It doesn't work that way, and the United States made it very clear the decisions being taken by the South African government, and specifically by the ANC, are to the detriment of the national security interests of the United States. And if the government cannot understand that, well, then we have a huge problem, and it seems that we are there.
Well, the ANC is wedded to, we're almost done, ANC is wedded to this concept of transformation, which I consider a dog whistle for black supremacy and racism, because you shouldn't convey advantage on people based on an immutable fact like skin color or pigmentation, and you shouldn't give people disadvantage based on that. But they're wedded to this transformation thing, and I would argue that the ANC has transformed South Africa. They've transformed it from a country that was a mixed first and third world situation with functioning economy, with functioning financial markets, mining industry, roads, rails, ports that were worked very well, and a system of governance that could deliver services to all of its citizens if it wanted to, into one in which the majority, many of whom were excluded from that, are now participating. But you have a collapsing third world state, and that's what they've transformed into, where the educational expectations are 30%, 30%, 30%, and 40% in your first language. They have transformed South Africa.
Correct, and the reality is that they may find the equality of outcome by getting all of us on the lowest common denominator. And that's not in the interest of anybody. There are so many opportunities. We are ready to make a difference. We are committed to make that difference, but we need some assistance, and let's see how this is going to develop.
Well, Dr. Mulder, as an American, I'm here to say that I think my country wants to help South Africa, but it has to help itself first, and hopefully that the government can realize that in time. If you can indulge me for one more question, which came in here from a gentleman asking about the national dialogue, I'll share my thoughts. That way, I'm the one that's controversial, not you, and I'll let you jump in here. But my thoughts on the national dialogue is, and I actually agree with John Steenhuisen on this, we've had a national dialogue. It was called an election in 2024, and the ANC clearly is not popular. They've lost 1/3 of their paid members over a 2-year stretch. We found out today, almost 200,000 members. That's how unpopular they are. And so we've had the dialogue. There's no need for a cafe clutch to discuss things with elites who get to sit around in fancy hotels and sip cappuccinos while stroking each other's egos. That's my take on it. The dialogue that you need to have is in Parliament and change the laws. What's your take?
Yes, let me put it this way. First of all, in principle, I will never be not in favor of talking. You have to dialogue with people, especially in South Africa where we've got this diversity and we've got all the problems. We have to continue to talk to one another. That's in principle. My understanding of what the dialogue was supposed to be is something completely different of where we are now. Let me try to explain that. When you form a coalition government or a government of national unity, you need to spend enough time to negotiate and form a new policy platform that is going to become the policy platform of this new government, because the new government is a bringing together of different parties. Because of our constitution, we didn't have the opportunity to negotiate with one and another within that creating of that policy platform.
You had such a short time frame to form a government.
We had 14 days after the election to elect a president. He appointed the executive, and then everything started. In the statement of intent for the government of national unity, its provision is being made for a national dialogue. My understanding was that immediately after that, after the appointment of the president, the parties within the government of national unity will come together and form a dialogue amongst each other to settle out a policy platform for this new government. That never happened. So now 12 months later, there's a national dialogue on the table, but it's something completely different, as you correctly point out. It's not what we had in mind. It's almost as if this new dialogue is supposed now to sanction the steps taken by the ANC and to make that acceptable, etc. So there's a huge question mark about the national dialogue. So on the one hand, yes, you need to talk, but you need to talk in the right structure, in the right process, with the right agenda, with the right outcomes. And as correctly being pointed out, the election was a dialogue where the people expressed themselves and said, this is what we think, and we sent them back. But these are the kind of challenges. I guess the president will also, perhaps for 10% on Sunday evening, refer to the national dialogue.
Well, I think my prediction is it's going to be about Nkunu. That's going to be what it's going to be about. He'll, in passing, reinforce he's committed to transformation in a sentence or two, and he might mention the tariffs in passing. But I think that's kind of where we're at, and I think you're right about the 10% for that other piece there. So, Dr. Mulder, I've asked all the questions. Here's if you've got anything you want to share we haven't covered, or any topic you think is important for South Africans to focus on right now, I'll give you the floor right now, and anything you want to share with us, because I've been asking all the questions.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's an honor to be part of your show. And I think by what you're doing is you're enlightening not only the people in the United States, but also giving guidance in South Africa. You're broadly watched by many, many people in South Africa in terms of what comes out of your shows. And I'm very happy to participate. Let's see what happens on Sunday evening. Maybe we were both wrong, and the president will discuss the Italy Springbok game.
I don't think so. Well, if they lose, he'll probably bring it up. But yikes! All right, Dr. Mulder. Bye, donkey. As always, it's a distinct pleasure, and appreciate it. And keep doing the good work you're doing there. I have to say this anecdotally. I don't know what kind of sense your party is getting. But, I mean, my audience obviously is not representative of all of South Africa. Although I have a black, white, brown, Indian audience, I have coloreds and Indians and whites and Afrikaners. I mean, I have lots of South Africans, but they tend to be centrist and center-right rather than being across the political spectrum. So that's what I mean by not representative. So it's not representative of South Africa. What I can tell you is that you are getting, I can tell you anecdotally, a lot of support from the thousands of viewers that I have who are impressed by where the party's going, what you're doing. And right now, you're not getting the stink of the GNU on your party. So congratulations on that. But so I just want to share that with you. A lot of people are are really, I think, moving to your standard. And it doesn't appear that you're actually taking any major effort to bring them. So if you make a major effort to bring them, maybe things will go very well for you in municipal elections.
That's very much encouraging, and I'm very thankful for that. And that's the kind of thing that I see throughout in South Africa at the moment. The message that we are bringing across is a realistic message, it's logical, and we are really trying to make a difference, a positive difference, not only for our constituency, but in the best interest of South Africa, and that is what people really want to see, and we believe that we can do that, and we will be making that effort to reach out to that specific constituency, a broad-based constituency, and we'll get the support, I can assure you.
And that's awesome. And one final note here. I did note with great interest that on your return, there was no discussion of treason charges against your delegation.
Yes, I was expecting the treason charges, and nothing happened, which was quite interesting.
Well, that's because I think they know that they'll be exposed when the truth comes out. All right, Dr. Mulder, once again, thanks a lot. Very much appreciated. I don't know if you'll be watching the game tomorrow. I presume you will, but I hope you enjoy your weekend, and we'll chat soon. All right, God bless.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Good night.
All right, folks, Dr. Corne Mulder, the leader of Freedom Front Plus, I'll let him drop out of there, and I'll get myself adjusted over. Let me put him in the second there into the waiting room. There we go. All right, there you go. Folks, I hope you found that interesting, and my thanks to my guest, Dr. Mulder, who, as always, was fantastic to talk to. And we've I don't want to say solved, but we've clarified a few of the things that I had questions about, and I analyzed, and it appears that I came to the correct conclusion about what they meant about AGOA. There was a miscommunication, and what's going on with the tariffs and what's going on with the refugee program. So that's exciting. So thank you, Dr. Mulder, for sharing that, and thank you for your Afrikaner delegation coming to the States. And again, my apologies, we weren't able to link up in D.C., but as we said, their schedule is pretty full. When you come this far, folks, there's only so many things you can do, and while I'm appreciative that they give me the time, I'm happier that they go places they needed to go and to accomplish the things they need to do. It's much more important for the delegation to talk to the White House or Ted Cruz than it is to talk to Chris Wyatt. I'm just saying. Maybe one day I'll be on the level of Ted Cruz in the White House, but that's not today. So they did the right thing for South Africans. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'll be on Rugby Ascended tomorrow. Please go watch my content. I've produced, I think, 3 videos this morning on the channel, a short and 2 prepared videos. One about refugees and another about what Ramaphosa is going to be talking about on Sunday. And I will be back, as I said, tomorrow on Rugby Ascended. And I'm also trying to have a conversation with folks. Anyway, I'll keep that to myself. Thank you, Marilyn. Good to see you there. All right. You guys take care. And we'll catch you either on Rugby Ascended tomorrow or if any breaking news comes out tonight on this side. Take care, guys. Appreciate it. You got to tune in for the morning show for the songs. No song in this, not for interviews. All right, cheers, everybody. And you can go to Spotify. You can find my music there now. Folks, 10 songs already loaded up, and we're putting more on there. All right, cheers. God bless. Thank you, Dr. Mulder. Appreciate it.